Hey, thank you for tuning in for another episode of the Roots Podcast. Today I want to talk about life on the frontier and the beginnings of vaquero culture in Mexico. So the typical translation of the word vaquero into English is cowboy. And we all have an image of what the cowboy looks like, right? It's something that you've seen in Hollywood movies. It's, the gunslinger. He's a vigilante fighting for justice, or he's a bandit, or he's a sheriff. All these popular images, exist out there to express the idea of being a cowboy. Pretty much all of those are wrong. Those ideas were popularized by Hollywood in the 1950s and 60s and 70s, with the spaghetti Western films and, the John Wayne films. Those ideas or those perceptions of the word cowboy were created more or less through Hollywood. But there's a much more deeper meaning to the word cowboy and its Spanish translation vaquero. The other popular image that we have of the Wild West is the Native American on horseback, the Plains Native. You might think of an Apache or a Comanche, out there in the plains fighting against westward expansion. And, so that's another image that's conjured up. Again, that is not a vaquero. So then what is a vaquero? What makes somebody a vaquero? In the strictest sense, a vaquero is a cattle rancher. So then you might be thinking, well, then how does that apply to Mexico? How did this, cattle ranching culture arrive in what is now Mexico? And how did Mexicans become vaqueros? So the cattle ranching culture or the vaquero culture in Mexico dates back to a man named Gregorio de Villalobos. And he arrived in Mexico in the 1520s, and he was the first person to get permission to bring cattle into Mexico. He obtained that permission from Hernán Cortés, who at the time was governor of Nueva España. And so the introduction of cattle ranching into Mexico began with those two people. And so you can say that they were the first two vaqueros in Mexico. Now remember, this culture came from Spain, so they weren't the first two vaqueros ever. They were just the first ones to bring it to Mexico. Now this culture, this vaquero culture that was brought from Spain, that's different than charro culture. And I'll get to charro culture in a second.